I married him to save my family, but the cold CEO became the one I couldn't escape. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In a world where appearances can be deceiving, sometimes a single act of kindness can change everything. Today's story is about a man who's about to learn that trust isn't something you can test, it's something you earn. Let's find out what happens when his life takes an unexpected turn. Stay tuned to see how honesty and a moment of vulnerability can change everything. As Sophie stood there, her mind was racing. Jake's words echoed in her ears. Asterisk. Can I trust you? Asterisk. His eyes, intense and searching, made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something huge. She hadn't expected this, didn't know what to say. Here she was, just a waitress in a small cafe, trying to make ends meet. And now a man who could change everything was asking if she could be trusted. Sophie looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of his gaze, her heart pounding. What was he really asking? Was he testing her? Or was he simply seeking something real in a world full of pretenses? She wasn't sure, but she could feel the tension thick in the air, and it terrified her. She had no idea where this conversation was going. But she knew one thing. Honesty was all she had. I'm just trying to make it through the day, she said softly, trying to find her voice. But you're asking something bigger than I can answer right now. Jake didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, his eyes never leaving her. Sophie could feel her nerves getting the best of her, her mind racing with possibilities, each more overwhelming than the last. This was not just a date. This was something deeper. It was like stepping into a game where the rules weren't clear, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to play. Jake watched her closely, studying every subtle shift in her expression. He could see the hesitation, the uncertainty, and he admired it. It was raw, genuine, something so rare in his world. He wasn't sure why, but he felt a strange pull toward her. Asterisk. This was different asterisk, he thought. He had spent so long keeping people at arm's length, ensuring no one got too close, that he had forgotten what it felt like to truly connect with someone. To see them for who they were, without the masks of status or wealth. I'm not asking for an answer right now, Jake said finally, his voice steady. But I want to know something. Do you believe in trust? In people being real with each other? Sophie paused, the weight of his question settling on her shoulders. She wanted to answer him, to tell him she believed in trust, but everything about this situation felt wrong. How could she trust someone who was so much more than she ever could be? How could she believe in someone who probably had more secrets than she could ever imagine? Trust is hard, she said, her voice trembling slightly. It's hard to trust when you've been let down so many times. I've learned that people don't always do what they say they will. Jake looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and understanding. He had heard that line before. He had said it himself many times. In the cold boardrooms and high-rise offices, where promises were just words in the air. He knew what it was like to have trust shattered. But what he didn't know was how to rebuild it, how to find it again. And now, he found himself wanting to find that trust with her. Sophie, the girl who didn't know who he was, the one who wasn't impressed by his money or his title, was the one who seemed to understand what trust really meant. It wasn't about contracts or business deals or power. It was about the simple, raw connection between two people. You don't know who I really am, do you? Jake asked, his voice soft but filled with curiosity. Sophie shook her head. She had no idea who he was. And frankly, she didn't care. He was just another guy who had come into her life and made things more complicated than they needed to be. No, I don't, she replied. And honestly, I don't know if it matters. Who you are doesn't change who I am. Jake's expression shifted. There it was again, her honesty. Sophie had no idea who he was, no idea about his wealth or his power, and yet she wasn't fazed. She wasn't trying to impress him or get anything out of him. That simplicity, that pure-heartedness, was exactly what he had been searching for. He stood up from his seat and walked around the table, stopping just in front of her. For a moment, they both stood there in silence, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Jake's heart raced, and for the first time in a long while, he felt vulnerable. He didn't like it. He didn't want it, but it was there, and he couldn't deny it. "I'm not who you think I am," Jake said softly, his voice almost a whisper. Sophie looked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm not just some guy you met at a cafe," he replied, his voice steady, but with a hint of sadness. "I've got a lot more to me than you could imagine." Sophie felt a chill run down her spine. She could sense the shift in his tone, the sudden change in his demeanor. There was more to him, much more. But what did that mean for her? For them? "I don't know what you're trying to say, Jake," Sophie said quietly. "But if you're telling me this is some kind of test, I don't know if I'm ready for it." Jake stepped back, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. This wasn't going the way he had planned. This wasn't supposed to be about him. It was supposed to be about her, about how her honesty and purity were what he needed to find again. But here he was, testing her, when it should have been the other way around. He had his answer. She was real. She was someone he could trust. But what would that trust cost him? After Jake revealed that he wasn't the person Sophie thought he was, the room fell into a heavy silence. Sophie's mind was racing, trying to process what he had just said. She was trying to make sense of everything, but the pieces just wouldn't fit together. He wasn't just some regular guy. He had secrets, layers she hadn't seen before. And now, standing before her, he was showing a side of himself she didn't expect. "What are you trying to tell me, Jake?" Sophie's voice trembled slightly, not out of fear, but from confusion. Jake sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair. He wasn't sure how to explain it to her. This wasn't how he had planned this conversation. He didn't want to sound like he was hiding something, but he also didn't know how to break it to her. "I'm not the man you think I am," he said again, more firmly this time, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm not just the guy who sat at your table. I'm someone who's built an empire, someone with power, someone who can make things happen. But I've been hiding it from you because I wanted to know if I could trust you, if you could accept me for who I really am, not what I have." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't wrap her head around it. She had thought Jake was just another guy, someone like her, working through the motions of life. But now, he was telling her he was someone important, someone with power and wealth, beyond what she could imagine. "Wait, you mean—" Sophie started, her voice faltering as the pieces started to click together. "You're telling me that all this time you've been hiding who you really are?" Jake nodded slowly. "Yes," he said quietly. "I wanted to see if you would still be the same person to me, if you would still treat me the same, knowing the truth. I didn't want to be just another rich guy asking for validation. I wanted to know if there was someone who could love me for me, not for what I can offer." Sophie stared at him, trying to understand, trying to grasp what he was saying. She was overwhelmed, unsure of how to feel. Part of her wanted to feel angry, to feel betrayed that he had lied to her. But another part of her, the part that had always believed in honesty and trust, couldn't help but feel a strange sense of sympathy for him. He was standing there, vulnerable, in a way she had never seen. "I don't know what to say," Sophie whispered, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I mean, you've been lying to me, Jake. You've been pretending to be someone else. How am I supposed to trust you now?" Jake's expression softened, and for the first time, Sophie saw the vulnerability in his eyes. He wasn't just the powerful businessman anymore. He was a man who had been hiding behind his own facade. A man who had been so afraid of being vulnerable that he had pushed away everyone who could have cared for him. "I understand why you're upset," Jake said, his voice quiet. I've spent so long building walls around myself that I forgot what it felt like to be open, to let someone in. But Sophie, I'm asking you to trust me now. I know I messed up, but I want to make it right. I want to be honest with you, even if it scares me, even if it means I risk losing you. Sophie stood still, the weight of his words sinking in. She had been in similar situations before, where trust had been broken, where people had hidden their true selves. But something about Jake's sincerity, his raw honesty, made her pause. He wasn't just asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a chance to start over, to rebuild what had been lost. I don't know if I can just forget everything, Sophie said softly, her voice filled with hesitation. I'm not sure if I can just let it go. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if you can prove to me that you're not just the man who lied to me, but the man you say you are now. Jake's eyes brightened, a flicker of hope appearing in them. He took a step closer to her, the distance between them shrinking. I'll prove it to you, Sophie, he promised. I'll show you who I really am. I won't hide anymore. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust. Sophie looked at him for a long moment, weighing her options. She had been hurt before, her trust broken by people she thought she could rely on. But there was something in Jake's eyes, something in the way he was standing there, so vulnerable, that made her believe he was telling the truth. Maybe this could be the start of something new, something different. Okay, Sophie said, her voice steady, but full of uncertainty. But this isn't going to be easy. Trust takes time. Jake nodded, his face serious but grateful. I know, he said softly, but I'm willing to take the time. I'll prove myself to you, Sophie. I won't let you down. The room fell silent once again. But this time, the tension was different. It wasn't the tension of uncertainty or lies. It was the tension of two people standing on the edge of something new, something they weren't sure of, but were willing to try. Sophie took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe this was the beginning of something real. Maybe trust wasn't as impossible as she thought. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Sophie. She had never expected her life to take such a turn. But here she was, standing in front of Jake, trying to make sense of everything. There was still a part of her that couldn't quite believe that the man she had been talking to, the man she had helped without asking anything in return, was really who he said he was. But then again, maybe that was the problem. Maybe she had been too quick to judge him based on appearances, based on what he seemed to be. She couldn't deny that the way he was opening up to her, the way he was trying to prove himself, made her start to question everything she had thought about trust. It wasn't easy, though. Trust didn't come overnight, and Sophie wasn't about to let herself get hurt again. As much as she wanted to believe in Jake, there was still a lingering doubt in her heart. She had been let down before, too many times. But this time she wanted to try. She wanted to believe that people could change. She wanted to believe that Jake could be different. A week had passed since their conversation, and Jake had kept his promise. He hadn't hidden behind his wealth or his power. He had been there, every step of the way, trying to show Sophie who he really was. And he wasn't backing down. He took her out to dinner, not to impress her, but to show her that he wasn't just some cold businessman. He was a person with flaws, with a past, and with a future that was still unfolding. He had been vulnerable in front of her, and for the first time he was learning to let go of the walls he had built around himself for so long. But Sophie was still hesitant. She couldn't help it. She had been burned before. Trust wasn't something she could just give away, not without testing it first. And that was exactly what Jake was doing. He was giving her the time she needed to figure it out. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't pushing her. He was simply showing her that he was worth the wait. I know it's not easy, Jake said one night, as they sat at the small cafe where they had first met. But I just want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for the long haul, Sophie. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make it right. I want to prove to you that I'm not just some guy who's out for himself. I'm someone who can be trusted, someone who can love. Sophie looked at him, her heart torn. She could see the sincerity in his eyes. She could feel it in the way he spoke, in the way he held her gaze. But there was still a part of her that was afraid of getting too close, afraid of falling for someone who might not be what they seemed. But what if he was? What if Jake really was everything he said he was? What if the person standing before her was the one she had been waiting for? The one who would show her that trust wasn't something to be afraid of. I don't know, Jake, Sophie said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to believe you. I really do. But I can't just forget everything. You've shown me a different side of you. Yes, but that doesn't mean I can erase the past. It doesn't mean I can just forget the lies. Jake nodded, understanding. He didn't expect her to forget. He didn't expect everything to be perfect right away. He knew it would take time. But that was something he was willing to give her. Time. Space. He wasn't in a rush. He wasn't going anywhere. He had made his choice. And now it was up to her to make hers. I don't want you to forget, Jake said softly. I just want you to know that I'm not the man I used to be. I've made mistakes, and I can't change that. But I can change how I move forward. I can change how I show up for you. Sophie took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had been living in a world of uncertainty for so long. But now, here was someone who was offering her a chance to trust again, a chance to believe that love, real love, wasn't something to be afraid of. For the first time in a long time, Sophie allowed herself to consider the possibility. What if Jake was the one who could show her that? What if, just maybe, she could trust him? I don't know if I can trust you fully yet, Sophie said, her voice trembling. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give you a chance. But this is going to take time. And I need you to be patient with me. Jake smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He had been patient with her all along, and he would continue to be. He would prove to her that he was someone worth trusting. I'm patient, Sophie, he said softly. I'll wait as long as it takes. The air between them felt lighter now, as if the weight of the past had been lifted, even if just a little. They weren't there yet, but they were on their way. And for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt the smallest flicker of hope in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie slowly began to let her guard down. She had made a decision, a small one, but it felt significant. She would give Jake a chance. It wasn't easy, not by any means. Every day, doubts and fears crept into her mind, asking if she was making the right choice. Could she trust him? Could she really believe in someone who had hidden so much from her? But there was something in the way Jake treated her, something real, something that spoke louder than any doubts in her heart. He had kept his word, not rushing her, not pushing her. He simply showed up, again and again, with no agenda, other than to prove to her that he was someone worth trusting. He had changed. She could see it in the way he listened, in the way he didn't shy away from being vulnerable anymore. They spent more time together, outside the cafe, outside the walls of his empire. Jake took her on walks through the park. Just the two of them. No bodyguards, no distractions. He let her into his world, but only the parts that mattered, the simple things. His smile when she made a joke, the way he always paid attention when she spoke, the way he genuinely wanted to know more about her life, her dreams, her fears. Sophie, on the other hand, was still struggling to believe. She had always been independent, strong. She had built her life with her own two hands. And trusting someone, especially a man, wasn't something she did lightly. But Jake was different, wasn't he? He had shown her so much of himself, and yet she still felt like there was something missing, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Maybe she was afraid that the moment she let herself fall too hard, too fast, would be the moment it all came crashing down. Sophie was walking the tightrope of her emotions, trying to keep her balance, unsure of whether to step forward or back. But then, something happened that neither of them expected. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind that felt peaceful, serene. Sophie had just finished her shift at the cafe when Jake texted her, asking if they could meet. They had agreed to go for a walk again, like they had the previous weekends. But this time felt different. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a feeling that things were about to shift. When she arrived at the park, Jake was already there, sitting on their usual bench, waiting for her. There was something about his posture, his body language, that told her he was nervous. Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen him like this before. Jake looked up as she approached, and for a moment, he didn't speak. His eyes met hers, and in that silence, Sophie felt the weight of his gaze, the unspoken words that hung in the air between them. "Jake?" Sophie asked, her voice soft but steady. "What's going on?" He hesitated for a moment before standing up and walking toward her, his expression serious, almost anxious. "Sophie, I need to tell you something," he said quietly, his voice low. Sophie felt a pang of anxiety in her chest. What was it? What was he about to say? She braced herself, her heart beginning to race. "What is it, Jake?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jake took a deep breath, his hand reaching into his pocket. Sophie watched him, her mind swirling with all the possible outcomes. He was acting different, nervous, unsure. "Sophie, I know I've asked a lot of you," Jake began, his voice filled with sincerity. "I know I've made mistakes, and I know I can't undo the past. But I've learned something over these past few weeks, something that I didn't expect. I've learned that trust isn't just about believing in someone else, it's about believing in yourself, too. And I want you to know that I trust you, Sophie, with everything I have." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. His words hit her like a wave, crashing over her, sweeping her up in the unexpected emotion they carried. She had never heard him speak like this before. The depth of what he was saying, his vulnerability, his openness, was something she hadn't expected. Jake continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm not asking for anything in return, Sophie. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, or your love, or your trust. I'm simply asking you to believe that I'm here, that I'm willing to fight for this, for us. But there's something I need to tell you, something I've been keeping from you." Sophie's heart pounded in her chest, 1,000 thoughts running through her mind. What was he saying? What was he about to reveal? She stepped closer to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is it, Jake?" she asked, her words laced with concern. Jake pulled his hand from his pocket and revealed a small velvet box. Sophie's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening. Jake smiled softly, but there was a quiet intensity in his gaze. "Sophie," he said gently, his voice filled with emotion, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it. Will you marry me?" Sophie's world seemed to stop. The question hung in the air between them, suspended in time. Her heart raced, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. She had been so unsure, so guarded, and now, here he was, offering her a future she hadn't expected. The sincerity in his eyes, the tenderness in his voice, made her feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. Hope. She looked at the ring in his hand, then back at him, and for the first time, Sophie felt herself truly letting go of the fear that had held her back for so long. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, Jake, I will marry you." The smile that spread across his face was the brightest thing Sophie had ever seen. And in that moment, she knew. She knew that no matter what had happened in the past, no matter the obstacles they had faced, this was where she was meant to be. With him. The days after Sophie said yes felt like a dream, a whirlwind of emotions and decisions, but most of all, excitement. Sophie couldn't believe how fast things were moving, how quickly her life was changing. Just a few weeks ago, she was working long shifts at the cafe, struggling to make ends meet, questioning whether she would ever find someone who truly understood her. Now, she was planning a future with Jake, a future she had never imagined, with a man who had once been a stranger, but was now someone she loved, someone she trusted. Jake had kept his promise. He had been patient, understanding, and unwavering. He showed her every day that he wasn't the man she had first thought he was, and he was proving to her that trust wasn't something to be afraid of. But as the wedding plans began to take shape, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. It wasn't the wedding itself, it was the life they would have together afterward. Sophie had grown used to her independence, to doing things on her own, and she found herself wondering if she was ready to give all of that up. She loved Jake. There was no doubt about that. But was she ready for everything that came with being his wife? With being part of his world? They had spent so much time getting to know each other. But there was still a part of Sophie that hadn't fully let go of her doubts. One evening, as they sat in their favorite cafe, Sophie looked at Jake across the table. He was smiling, as he always did when they were together, but she could see the hint of concern in his eyes. He had always been so attuned to her, always noticing when something was off, when she was struggling. "Sophie," Jake said gently, setting down his coffee cup and meeting her gaze. "You've been quiet lately. What's on your mind?" Sophie hesitated, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. She had wanted to be strong, to be certain, but the reality of marriage, of joining her life with someone else's, was more daunting than she had expected. I'm just thinking about everything," Sophie admitted, her voice soft. "The wedding, the future. I've never had to share my life with anyone in this way before. I'm not used to being part of something so big, so permanent. I love you, Jake. I really do. But sometimes I wonder if I'm ready for all of this." Jake's expression softened, and he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Sophie, I understand. I know it's a big step, and I don't want you to feel pressured. This is a big change, and it's okay to have doubts. But I want you to know that we're in this together. I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking you to build something with me. You're not losing yourself, Sophie. You're just adding me to your life, just like I'm adding you to mine." Sophie looked down at their joined hands, the warmth of his touch grounding her in that moment. She knew he was right. She wasn't losing herself. She was gaining something. Someone that she had never thought she'd have. She was gaining love, partnership, and trust. And as scary as it seemed, it was also beautiful. "I want this," Sophie said, lifting her eyes to meet Jake's. "I want to build a life with you, but I also want to make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. Not out of fear, not because I'm afraid of change." Jake smiled softly, his thumb brushing over her hand. "You're doing it because you love me, and I love you. And together, we'll figure out the rest. There's no rush, Sophie. We have time to grow, to learn, and to build a future that's ours." Sophie felt the tension in her chest start to ease. She could do this. She could take this next step, knowing that Jake was by her side, ready to face whatever challenges came their way. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. As they sat there, hands entwined, Sophie realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about trust, about growth, and about choosing to stand together, even when things were uncertain. And for the first time, Sophie felt truly ready. The wedding day came sooner than either of them expected. There was excitement in the air, but also a quiet sense of peace. The ceremony wasn't extravagant. It was simple, intimate, just the way Sophie wanted it. She didn't need a big show. She didn't need the world to know how much she loved Jake. All she needed was him. When she walked down the aisle, her heart was pounding. But it wasn't out of fear. It was out of love. Love for the man waiting at the altar. Love for the future they would build together. And as she reached his side, their eyes met, and she saw everything she had ever wanted in his gaze: trust, security, and a love that would last a lifetime. "I do," Sophie whispered, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I do, Jake. I'll love you forever. Jake smiled, his eyes shining with happiness. I do too, he said softly. And I will always choose you, Sophie. Always. In that moment, as they exchanged vows and rings, Sophie knew that she had made the right choice. This wasn't just a marriage. It was the beginning of something new, something beautiful. And with Jake by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The weeks following their wedding were a whirlwind of new experiences and challenges for both Sophie and Jake. The transition into married life wasn't as seamless as they had hoped, but it was real, and it was theirs. Sophie found herself learning to balance her independence with the commitment she had made to Jake. They had agreed to take things slow, to figure out their new dynamic. But sometimes it felt like there was a constant push and pull. Sophie still held on to the parts of her life that were just hers, her art, her friends, and her space. But with Jake's constant presence, a part of her began to feel like she was losing some of those pieces, like she was being pulled into his world of high-stakes business meetings and lavish events. Jake, for his part, didn't want to change her. He wanted to be a part of her life, but he understood the importance of her maintaining the things that were important to her. They spent their evenings together talking about everything and nothing at all, and yet, Sophie still felt a sense of loss. She had imagined that being married to Jake, with all the love and support he offered, would fill her up completely, but instead, she felt a strange emptiness, one she couldn't quite name. Jake noticed it, of course. He noticed how Sophie seemed more distant lately, how she would withdraw at times, how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes the way it used to. He was starting to wonder if it was his fault, if the pressure of being married to someone like him was becoming too much. He had promised Sophie that he wouldn't rush her, that he would give her space to find herself within their marriage. But what if she was already slipping away? The thought terrified him. He didn't know how to fix it, but he knew he couldn't lose her. He had lost so much in his life before his parents, his trust in people, and the idea of losing Sophie, the one person who truly understood him, was something he couldn't bear. One evening, as they sat in their living room, Sophie curled up on the couch, sketching in her notebook. Jake sat across from her, watching her carefully. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice him looking at her until he finally spoke. Sophie, Jake said softly, his voice filled with concern. What's going on? I can see it. You've been pulling away from me. What are you afraid of? Sophie looked up at him, her heart racing. She wasn't ready to talk about it, but she knew she couldn't keep hiding her feelings from him. She had promised him honesty, and now it was time to face the truth. Jake, I don't know, Sophie said, her voice quiet but steady. I've always been independent, you know. I've always done things my way, and now I'm part of something bigger. And it's not just about you, it's about me. I'm struggling to figure out who I am in all of this. I love you. I do, but I'm afraid that I'm losing myself. Jake sat there, stunned for a moment, trying to process her words. He had no idea that Sophie was feeling like this. He had been so focused on their life together, on their love, that he hadn't realized how much she was still struggling to hold on to the parts of herself that she had built before they met. Sophie, Jake said, his voice filled with understanding. You're not losing yourself. You're just finding a new version of yourself. I love the woman you were before we met, and I love the woman you're becoming now. But I need you to know that I'm not here to take away your independence. I'm here to stand beside you, to support you, no matter what. We don't have to do everything together. You can still have your space, your dreams. I just want to be a part of it. Sophie felt a wave of relief wash over her. Jake wasn't trying to change her. He wasn't trying to take away the things that made her who she was. He understood her in a way that no one else had before. For the first time in a long time, Sophie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to make this work. Maybe she could have her own space and still be with Jake. Maybe she could be both the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming. It was a new kind of balance, but she was willing to try. Thank you, Jake, Sophie said softly. her voice full of emotion. I needed to hear that. I think I've been scared. Scared that I would lose myself. But maybe I can still have both. I just need to figure out how. Jake smiled, his heart swelling with love for her. You will, he said, his voice full of reassurance. And I'll be here every step of the way. The next few days were filled with small victories. Conversations where Sophie began to open up about her fears, her hopes, her dreams. They found new ways to spend time together that allowed both of them to nurture their individual passions while still building their life together. Sophie took more time for herself, working on her art, reconnecting with friends, and Jake supported her every step of the way. He encouraged her to chase her dreams, and in turn, he shared more of his world with her. They were both learning to adjust to this new life, this new chapter in their marriage. And though it wasn't always easy, it felt like the beginning of something real, something lasting. It wasn't about finding perfection. It was about finding a way to love each other, not in spite of their differences, but because of them. They were a team, two people with their own paths, walking side by side. And for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt like she had finally found her place in the world, not just with Jake, but with herself. As the months passed, Sophie and Jake found themselves growing more and more comfortable in their new life together. The early struggles, the moments of doubt, seemed to fade away with time, replaced by a new sense of partnership and understanding. They had found their rhythm, a balance between their individual lives and their shared future. Sophie continued to pursue her art, her passion for painting, growing stronger with each passing day. Jake, ever supportive, made sure she had the space she needed to create, never once pressuring her to be anything other than who she was. In turn, Sophie began to open up more to him, sharing her hopes and dreams, her fears and insecurities. She realized that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about being vulnerable. And she was finally allowing herself to be truly seen by Jake. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sunset together, Sophie felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in years. The city stretched out before them, the golden light casting long shadows over the skyline. It was a quiet moment, one that felt like the calm after a storm. And Sophie knew that this was the life she had always wanted. It wasn't the grand gestures or the extravagant displays of love that mattered, it was the quiet, everyday moments. The way Jake held her hand without saying a word, the way he made her feel safe, the way he truly saw her, not as a wife, but as a person. Jake, Sophie said softly, breaking the silence. I've been thinking a lot lately, and I just want you to know how grateful I am. For everything. For you. For us. Jake turned to look at her, his eyes softening as he smiled. You don't have to thank me, Sophie, he said, his voice warm. We've been through a lot together, but I'm just happy you're here with me. I don't need anything more than this. Just you, by my side. Sophie smiled back, feeling her heart swell with love for him. I'm so lucky to have you, she whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. I never imagined I would find someone like you. Someone who understands me, who loves me for exactly who I am. Jake kissed the top of her head gently, his hand resting on hers. And I'm lucky to have you, Sophie. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've shown me what real love is, what it means to trust, to be vulnerable, to truly be seen. They sat there for a long time, in the fading light of the evening, content in each other's presence. There were still challenges ahead. They knew that, but they felt ready for them. Together, they were ready for whatever life threw their way because they had each other. Sophie's phone buzzed in her pocket, interrupting the peaceful moment. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was a message from her mother. Everything okay? Jake asked, noticing her change in expression. Sophie smiled as she read the message. Yeah, it's just my mom. She's asking if we want to come over for dinner this weekend. She says she misses us. Jake chuckled, squeezing her hand. Your mom always seems to know how to make us feel like family, he said, teasing her gently. Sophie nodded, her smile widening. She does, doesn't she? She paused for a moment, her expression softening. You know, when I first met you, I wasn't sure what to expect. I never imagined I would be sitting here, married to you, with the kind of life we've built together. It's better than I ever could have hoped for. Jake looked at her, his eyes full of love and admiration. I feel the same way. I never thought I would find someone like you, someone who could make me feel whole again. You've given me everything I ever needed. They sat together in silence for a while longer, the evening settling around them. It felt as if the world had slowed down just for them, allowing them to savor this moment. But deep down, they both knew that this was only the beginning. They had built something strong, something real, and it was theirs to hold on to. Sophie looked up at the stars, beginning to twinkle in the sky, a feeling of gratitude filling her heart. She had come so far, from the doubts and fears that once held her back to this place of peace and love. And it was all because she had allowed herself to trust, to love, to be loved. And for the first time, she truly believed that everything they had gone through, every moment of uncertainty, had led them to this place. She had found not just a husband, but a partner, someone who had shown her what it meant to build a life together. And as they sat there, wrapped in the warmth of each other's presence, Sophie knew without a doubt that they had a future filled with love, trust, and endless possibilities. As the days passed, Sophie and Jake continued to grow together in their marriage, finding new layers of trust, love, and understanding that they hadn't even realized were possible. They had faced challenges, doubts, and moments of uncertainty. But with each hurdle, they only became stronger. Sophie had learned that true love was not about perfection, but about the willingness to face difficulties together, hand in hand, and to keep moving forward. It was about being honest, being vulnerable, and learning to trust someone enough to let them in, no matter the past or the fears. Jake, too, had grown in ways he never thought possible. He had built an empire, achieved everything he once thought was important. But it wasn't until he met Sophie that he realized how little those things mattered without someone to share them with. She had shown him what it truly meant to love and be loved, to give without expectation, and to trust without doubt. Together, they had learned that love was not just an emotion. It was a choice to show up for each other, to be there in the hard times, and to celebrate the good times. As the years went by, their love only deepened. Sophie continued to paint, pouring her heart into her art, while Jake continued to lead his company with a newfound sense of balance. They supported each other's dreams, celebrated each other's successes, and found joy in the simple moments, whether it was a quiet evening at home or a spontaneous trip to a new place. One summer afternoon, Jake and Sophie found themselves sitting in their favorite park, the same one where they had spent so many quiet afternoons together, talking about their dreams and their future. Sophie looked at Jake, her heart full of love and gratitude. She couldn't believe how far they had come, from two strangers meeting by chance to building a life together that was more than she could have ever hoped for. Jake, Sophie said softly, her voice full of emotion. Do you ever think about how far we've come? About where we started? Jake smiled, his eyes warm as he reached out to take her hand. I think about it all the time, he said, his voice filled with affection. We've been through so much, but I wouldn't change a single thing. Every step, every challenge, it's all led us to this moment. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but right here with you. Sophie leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. They had built something beautiful together. And it wasn't just the big moments, the milestones, or the successes that made their love strong. It was the quiet, everyday moments that mattered the most. The shared glances, the laughter, the way they supported each other through everything life threw their way. They didn't need grand gestures or extravagant promises. They had each other, and that was enough. I'm so grateful for you, Jake, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. For everything you've done, for everything you are. You've shown me what it means to truly trust, to truly love, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for that. Jake kissed the top of her head, his heart swelling with love for her. You've shown me the same, Sophie. You've taught me what it means to open up, to be vulnerable, and to truly live. I'm the luckiest man alive to have you by my side. And as they sat there, in the warmth of the afternoon sun, they knew that this was just the beginning. Their love had been tested, stretched, and challenged, but through it all, they had come out stronger, more connected than ever. They had learned that love was a journey, not a destination, and that with each step they took together, they would continue to grow, continue to love, and continue to build the life they had always dreamed of. As the years went by, their love only deepened, and Sophie and Jake knew, without a doubt, that they had found something that would last a lifetime. They had found each other, and that was all that mattered. Together, they had built a love that would withstand anything life threw their way. And as they looked to the future, they knew that as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't face. Love wasn't just a feeling. It was a choice, a commitment, and a journey. And with Jake by her side, Sophie was ready to walk that journey for the rest of her life.